Hey, it's Benjamin Boyce. The UN women, they do this all the time. It's not shit posting, it's just really shitty posting. They decided to post this explainer on Mansplaination. It comes with the picture, but I'm just going to read the. Well, first we'll read the tweet and then we'll read their definition. You can avoid being a mansplainer by asking yourself these questions. Did she indicate any desire to hear this information? Is it possible that she knows more about this topic than I do? Did I read the room before starting to speak? And then this is the captioned definition. Mansplaining. The practice of a man explaining something to a woman in a way that shows he thinks he knows and understands more than she does. 2. A patriarchal act that trains women in self-doubt and self-limitation, just as it exercises men's unsupported overconfidence. Now, I don't know what they're up to. It seems like they are trying to empower women by giving them tools to be self-righteous over men, or to basically to interpret any action from a man as sexist. If you are interrupted, or if information flows in your direction from a man that you didn't ask for, you didn't want, or it makes you feel slightly embarrassed because you didn't know that information, and instead of dealing with that embarrassment or that feeling of insecurity, you basically blame the man, you basically blame patriarchy, and you interpret an act of rudeness or even an act of generosity of somebody with more experience than you trying to get you on your way, and you may be feel uncomfortable about that. You can just blame it on the patriarchy. Now, there's different ways of exploring this, and it's kind of an old trope, right? This is nothing new, but I was just having some thoughts on it. That for myself, if you look at the way that women generally behave, they are generally more socially aware. They are generally better at reading other people and at sidelining their thoughts in order to listen to other people's thoughts. Women in general are better listeners than men. Now, I myself am actually quite a good listener, so if we were going to divide everybody up into some sort of swath of gentrification, it's like gentrification, but dealing with your platonic essence of genderality. I do have feminine qualities where I do defer to other people generally, and I often doubt my own authority in most matters unless I get going and I lose my doubt and I just start flooding the room with my information. But I usually don't do that unless I'm in a controlled environment where I trust that people are listening to me. That's why I kind of excel at making videos on the internet, because nobody's here to interrupt me. I'm just talking into a camera. So I myself am basically generally tend to listen to other people rather than speak myself. If I'm interrupted, I will stop speaking and I'll let the other person speak. And I've noticed over the course of my life that men generally apply or give status to another man in a conversation that proposes that he has authority on a matter, right? There's a lot of status bound up in discussions among men about knowing what you're talking about. And so you have a lot of guys like learning about a car, and I'm thinking in terms of like teenage years. They'll learn about some aspect of the world and they'll invest their attention into that, and then they'll go forth and they'll talk about that car. They'll talk about what they know about, and they will talk from a position of authority, and then people will listen to them. They get rewarded with attention when they talk from a position of authority rather than a position of empathy, right? And it takes, some maturation for that type of man or that type of person, right? But it's generally a man. It takes some sort of pushback and some sort of, kind of knocking him down a bit before he kind of loosens up and learns to respond and to respect to his audience. That in and of itself is a social skill that can be learned, that should be learned. This is basically a matter of propriety. And the way that they're going about the UN women in their unsplaining or their marmsplaining or their mansplaining are going about trying to inculcate men in being more responsible and more sensitive is to attack them outright by calling it a sexed behavior, by calling any cross-sex interruption from a man to a woman as sexism or as some sort of vestige of this patriarchal norm that is hiding around every corner. That's not necessarily one, an accurate description of what's happening, because if you actually listen to any group of people talk, regardless of sex, there's always people who interrupt others. There's always people who assume that they have the authority, or that they have the upper hand, or they just kind of take they take the initiative and they start to speak to other people. It happens with everybody, right? It just happens to be a pattern that perhaps women are slightly more deferential to other people, and men are slightly more initiative to other in a situation, a social situation. You kind of want that. You kind of want people who take the initiative. But you don't teach people to be more sensitive by attacking them, right? Because they're going to get defensive. If you want people to be vulnerable, you don't start poking them. You don't make a sexist statement and call it mansplaining in order to get certain behaviors to change. Secondly, and this is the unfortunate outcome of this way of thinking, is that, like I said, you're giving this gift to women, this tool, this interpretive tool, to interpret any act that makes you feel uncomfortable as somehow wrong, as belonging to that other person. I feel uncomfortable. I feel unstable. It's got to be the patriarchy. It's got to be that man. That doesn't allow the woman to confront her own confidence and to build confidence, right? So to blame it on the patriarchy is actually a maladaptive move that disallows women to be empowered, that disallows women to say, okay, well, do I have the authority or don't I have the authority? And instead of taking that personally, actually check the man, stand up to the man, maybe even realize that the man is treating you as an equal, because he's probably going to do that to another man. More likely than not, the man that's interrupting you, or the man that's trying to give you information, is going to do that regardless of your sex. Do you want the man to treat you differently, or do you want the man to treat you as an equal? If you want to be treated as an equal, then you kind of have to take the blows, understand, is that his behavior, and how can I modify my behavior in such a way that I don't come off as weak to this in this situation? If you want to be strong, you focus on what's making you insecure and you figure that out. You be the bigger person, right? Basically. And the whole aspect of basically this feminist, a vestige of certain form of feminism, this certain form of activist feminism, which distills down into these little bite-sized bitchy bits, that don't actually really get down to the root of what it means to be a developed human being. It means to be a morally conscious, socially aware, and a confident person with a very strong basis in authority, a very strong grasp of the situation as it occurs, whether it is a social situation or the social situation that's about that thing that we're talking about, that's about that car, it's about that, whatever business thing that we're doing. Now, again, there can be a phenomena, I'm not discounting a phenomena, of men assuming that they know more than women, right? How do you go about telling men that they don't know more than anybody else? How do you accurately gauge if that man is speaking from a sense of fake authority or actual authority and is trying to actually help you, or just trying to forward his own position? There are forces at work in nature and in nurture in our culture that force the man to have some sort of authority, because if he doesn't come from a position of authority, other men won't respect him. So inter-male interaction is really based on who has the most authority, or who can speak or pretend they have the most authority. And then beyond that, beyond speaking from a place of authority, you get into the nitty-gritty of the argument, and you have to go through piece by piece and actually engage with the man's argument, or what the other person is saying. You get past how they're saying it, you get to what they're saying, and then you say, well, which information is useful, which information stacks up, and which is just pretend. And if you actually confront it, not as some sort of sexist thing or some sort of patriarchal thing, but just as a human phenomena, you come out on the other end with either more information, or you just let it go. It's like, well, I didn't need that information, and I move on. I think that the position of strength in this position is not for women to come up with the term and to kowtow, or to autist their way, or to do better their way into some sort of social position of power, right? This is a cheat. To just label this thing as mansplaination, it allows you to just take the high road, but not actually interact with the information. You don't become better. The other person doesn't become better either. It's bullshit. That's just what I had to say. So I'll talk to you guys later.